my family, my circus family, what I was born into was the royal family of the gutter. That was our name, the Royal Famille du Caniveau, the royal family of the gutter. And my family always taught me that the real royalty is down here. They don't know what they're missing up there.
Thank you for doing this.
I love you. Thank you for doing this.
Yep.
Ready.
Yeah, we're just gonna slide in. Shall I pour you some tea, my love?
I would love it if you could pour me some tea.
Betty, I'm gonna need you to find a spot. Okay.
Cheers. Let's get into it.
To the conversation of the century.
Oh my God.
So, the reason why I wanted to have this conversation with you now is because I have obviously gotten front row seat to your journey over the past few years. Let's go back to the very beginning. Real quick.
Which beginning? Well, my dad always drove giant vans. We were in the van with a lot of their friends, and I was in the back, and I had my headphones in, and I was singing aloud to Mariah Carey. And my dad's friend turned around and was like, take your headphones off. And he's like, if you're gonna sing, you need to learn to sing in tune. And I was like, okay. And that was obviously embarrassing, but also it served me well because I needed to learn to sing in tune.
And now you do.
And now I do.
Yeah.
Watch out, boys, yeah. Here comes the gospel truth, the gospel in between, the gospel truth, the gospel love, the color green, that's the gospel.
But I think I had a lot of experience of getting embarrassed into the things that I've gotten to do.
Right.
There's a million moments every single day that make up our lives, but then there's those certain little sparks that you're like, that changed something,
right.
That shifted something.
Right.
And yeah, that was one of them.
You come from a creative, incredibly creative, artistic, eccentric family.
Yes.
Like, not just your parents, but all of your parents' people.
Yes.
Were also very much. How do you describe that? How do you describe your?
I mean, I think to a lot of people, honestly, to make it easier, I'd say I grew up in the circus. I mean, that was almost the easiest way to describe it because it's so bizarre. It was just so abnormal. It was just so weird. And of course I didn't realize that. Like, I think looking back as a really young kid, it was so magical. I really got to experience magic because everything was dressing up. Everything was art. Everything was an experience. interesting thing to me is that for them, they were in their own way rebelling against the status quo. It was really fun until I needed to be cool.
Right.
You know? My friend group became so much more than what I had known.
Right.
At that time, they were busing kids from different neighborhoods to different schools. The CD was Seattle's black neighborhoods, and Washington was right in the heart of that. And it's shocking to me how much that time period affected and shaped and directed my life in a way that was so different from what I had experienced with my family.
Right.
It was like a big shift, because all of a sudden, all art that I was consuming was black art. We got to be in a show together a few years back. It was called Dear White People.
Yep.
Invited by the one and only Boom Boom LaRue.
Yeah,
thank
shout
you.
out to Boom Boom.
Jessica Rosa, thank you so much. In doing that show, she asked me to explore what my relationship was to myself, my culture, to black culture, and things of that nature. And the immense just love that I have for black culture, it was everything outside of what my family gave to me. It's so interesting because it felt like something I got to find that my parents didn't know about.
Right.
It was something that I was like, this is mine, and it's not.
Yeah.
You know, like, and it's not mine at all. And so the coming to understanding of that, you know, when we tie into where I am with my art now,
Right.
it shapes. I had to like go so many places, and that was really the beginning of inspecting what I was given as a child, what I was given into this world, and then what my story became.
You had talked about how your parents sort of rejected the status quo.
Yeah.
With the sort of like art that they chose to do, and they came up in traditional spaces. Your dad going to art school, your mom being a gymnast and getting a scholarship to go to school to do that art form.
Right.
But they both chose different paths. And
Right.
I know you also had a similar experience, which is so funny because, you know, thinking about like your parents doing that and then you doing kind of the same thing
In my own way.
in your own way, but
Yeah.
even though you were trying to reject that which your parents were trying to show you. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you gotta rebel against something. I definitely call myself a rebel without a cause, because I had, you know, everything that a lot of people would want, or you think that you want.
Mm-hmm.
And I've had so many people, especially people whose families really rejected them being artists, whose families really rejected them when it comes to especially more queer-centered art, you know, doing drag, things like that.
Right.
That was so normal for me growing up.
Right.
And my parents loved that. So for people who had parents who had such a hard time with that, people are like, oh my God, it must have been so great for you. It must have been so amazing. And in many ways it was.
Right.
In many ways it was, I really got to explore who I was. But in other ways, they were so well known. They were so established that it felt as though whatever I did was, I mean, I almost want to say in the shadow of what they did, you know, like whatever I was kind of good at, whatever I wanted to do, they were already doing. They had already done.
Right.
Because my family was already doing it, because they were already established in it, I expected myself to just be good at it right away. I wasn't aware of the understanding that you have to get there.
You gotta practice.
Well, you have to practice. You have what it takes to get there. And so that's something that I'm trying to unlearn to this day. I am trying to continuously unlearn that and allow for the space for growth, the space for mistakes, the space for trial and error, and just being bad at something until you're not. Singing, I could sit in my room and practice on my own, and then I could come out and all of a sudden I could do it.
You just wow them.
And then I liked that.
Yeah.
You know?
Definitely.
Because I shifted, I think, in a pretty big way. I think these are these moments that I'm talking about of doing Dear White People, releasing this album, you know, that started to I started to kind of shift my perspective of myself, started to really start thinking about who was I? I eventually did a one-woman show at Triple Door called Who in the World Am I? You know, I started really digging into this idea of who I was.
Right.
And for a number of reasons, you and I decided to end our relationship at a point where we both were burnt. I think we were burnt out from our own circumstances and didn't have a whole lot to give to a relationship, and were very much needing to discover who we were apart from one another.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it was dope, you know, that obviously that moment wasn't dope, but the fact that we remained friends through that sort of that very, very huge transition for both of us was, you know, something that I will cherish forever.
During that time, I started writing music. I started writing music about our experience. My experience through that situation. It was so huge that there was no other way for me to process it except to write music about it. It was the journey back to music for me because I've never shared my own voice.
You said something really powerful just now, in that you had never shared your own voice. That's huge.
Yeah.
Given the fact that you've been on stage your entire life.
Yeah.
You are now sharing your story, your words, your song.
Yeah. And everything we've talked about is this long journey back to that.
Right.
It's like you had to go all the way around the world to come back home.
Right.
And that's what it feels like it's been. When I built this altar, I did this. I made this what to me became connection. And it was connection to up above and down below. You know, it was the connection to the cosmos and the earth.
To the artistic parts of the boxes and the art that you're doing currently, there's obviously this very geometric nature to it, but it's also intuitive in a sense that you don't plan these things. They just happen.
Now, in the last just probably few weeks, and as I've started to really finish this one, I've realized that these pieces and what will become the rest of those pieces is actually based on Allow. So this is entitled Allow Love. And these are entitled Allow Connection. We've talked a lot about this journey, but we didn't really quite get into how deep the pandemic took me into myself, and how cutting off from everything I had ever done, everything I'd ever known, how much that affected the level to which I started rejecting almost everything in my life. I had to let go of everything. I felt at times like I let go of the connection to you. I let go of the connection to my family. I felt like I let go of everything, and it took me to depths that were scary, that were definitely really weird, and I didn't know how I would come back out of those things. I didn't know what that would look like, and I think I started really pushing away against a lot of things. So to me, to allow that to come back with intention is what I mean by that.
Yeah, and thinking about what the past couple years have been for you, going from being center stage in pretty much every aspect of your life to then, you know, for lack of better words, being forced to sort of like reevaluate, sit back, have several seats, whatever you want to call it.
I had several seats,
you know, in the ways that the world did that to all of us, but it did it to you in a very particular way because of how people know you in the world.
I think everybody's perspective is incredibly important. Actually, accepting that mine was important, allowing my own to be important. You know, and I think there is something to be said about needing external validation, and that you really have to find it within yourself, right? You really have to understand it for yourself. But I will say that there are times when having other people, you know, there's reasons messages come through people as well.
Right.
And when other people call to you to say something, when people say, hey, yes, okay, speak to this, or you specifically, your perspective is important here.
Right.
You can't ignore that either. By many ways, my nurture and my nature is to really be drawn to and love all different kinds of people. Like that feels so natural for me. I am in such awe and like deep appreciation for all different cultures. Like I'm just like, oh my God, what an incredible expanse of humanity. And then all of the shit that's attached to that, that's so horrendous. You don't have one without the other. And so in talking about having these conversations with people, like I've then had to also realize that the nurture of society has then instilled things in me that I certainly wish weren't there. Some of these things passed to me, certainly wish was not the case. Okay, how do we talk about that? How do we heal from that? You know, how do I notice that in myself and in the people closest to me and call attention to it and make sure that we're doing our part to heal for everyone. We've always had pretty in-depth and honest and hard conversations around race and the ways in which we are in relationship to one another and the importance of that. I thought I had a tremendous amount of tools. You know, I've had Black elders, and I've been lucky enough to have Black elders in my life since I was young. So I thought I had tools. And when George Floyd happened, you know, a lot of people, you know, you haven't spoken super openly about this, but like you didn't even really speak. I mean, you were so heartbroken, doesn't even do justice to what that feeling is. And I was like, as a white partner, was just like, I know nothing. I don't know how to be here for you in the way that I absolutely thought that I was. I 100% thought that I had those tools. We've talked about this as really this journey is like a conveyor belt, and it's like the more you learn, the more you're willing to understand the truth of what all of this is, no matter how horrendous, no matter how much it forces you to look at yourself in the mirror. You are walking on that treadmill, and you can, you know, you keep going. You just keep, you're like, okay, it doesn't necessarily mean it's ending, but if you stop, you start going backwards. And then you have to catch back up. So how far back do you want to go? And in this evolution of the world, in this understanding that my true core belief is to flip this pyramid that we've created, where we have, you know, whiteness as this top piece of this pyramid, you know, and we can't help but like it's, you know, cis white men, then cis white straight women, all of these things, and this pyramid that puts so much weight at the bottom, and like, what does it look like to flip that? All of a sudden it's gonna feel so heavy. I felt that from myself. I felt that from the people around me. I felt that from my white community members, that like, I don't want that. I don't want that feeling. You got to show up and do right by your people, and do right by yourself, and do right by the earth.
Absolutely.
I think that's it.
There's that.